Welcome back to the Property Frontline Market Watch. Today I'm here again with Scott Hoaxang, where we'll cover what's actually happened in the market in the last month and where we see the market heading. So let's just get started. I'll show my screen. So these are the core logic figures. And we're just focusing in here on houses for the moment. So, Scott, do you want to mention what you normally do when you first look at these when they come out?
Yeah, well, certainly we tend to like to dig into the house part of these reports because a lot of the data providers are mixing units and houses and putting out all sorts of dwelling stats. So pick the part of the measure that you're most interested in and just kind of run the row and look at what is happening out there in different markets. Shall
Yeah.
we just do kind of a quick run through here?
Sure.
So these are July monthly house price growth numbers. Sydney up 0.2%. Melbourne is now backtracking. I think you've heard quite a bit of that from Debra and I on the last two podcasts about what's happening in Melbourne, down 0.5%. On to BAP, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth. Brisbane up 1%. Adelaide still a strong 1.6. A little surprising there, I would say. Debra?
Yeah.
And Perth just continues to amaze all of us, honestly, because up 2% for the month. And you really just have to wonder how long that market's going to keep running. It's still running.
Yeah, it is. And it's still got a way to go, I think. Yeah. And then Hobart.
And we were talking about this earlier today. Hobart's quite a bit of weakness there, down 0.8%.
Yeah.
And as Debra and I were sort of talking about, not reading any of this in the press. Hobart was booming for a couple of years, and we saw stories weekly. But investors ringing us up about Hobart. What are we missing out on now? No one wants to talk about Hobart. So maybe worth a news story out there for the journos to go do a bit of a dig in to see what's happening out there.
Yeah. But I think it just goes to show how some markets can really be driven by the press. And so there was a lot of hype about Hobart for a couple of years. And quite frankly, I just never understood why people wanted to buy down there because there was never any real growth drivers, which we'll talk about later. But anyway, I can get off my high horse because apart from people who wanted to live there for retirement purposes or their home, we didn't buy any for any of our clients. And then bringing up the last of the 8. So Canberra, it's not very many houses in Canberra, is there?
Just blipping along 0.1% up, and we see poor little Darwin down 0.1%.
Oh,
spend time with Darwin these days.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. And so now looking at SQM research. So this is Louis Christopher's weekly publication, but this is his stats for the same time period. So looking at Sydney, all houses. So he's got Sydney down 0.7 for the month. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, certainly. And with that very high median, that would tend to say that's higher end part of the market having weakness. But we continue to see just all the amazing auction results being publicized here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then he's got Melbourne down 1.7 for houses, Brisbane back by 0.1%, Perth only up by 0.3%. The others have got them performing much better. What did they say too? Can't remember. Anyway, so Adelaide up by 1, Canberra down by 1, Darwin up by 5. Hobart back by 0.9%.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, then the national ones. So just goes to show the different data houses, which we're always talking about. Now, this is another data provider that I love what they're publishing. They do so many great cuts of different aspects of the market. But today we're looking at their home price index. But note the difference is that this is all dwellings. So the last two slides we showed you we were mainly focusing on houses, but this one is all dwellings, and just goes to show yet again, you've really got to know what you're looking at. And but this is very interesting because it's got the changes since COVID. So where do you want to focus in on this one, Scott? Do you want to look at monthly growth?
I mean, sure. I think the numbers follow the same trend. Sydney's slightly up. Melbourne not as far down as the others, I'd say, 0.21%. We see growth in Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth being the highest,
Mm.
and a little bit of weakness in Hobart and Darwin. My eyes do keep going to those COVID numbers, just
Oh
looking at
yeah, let's
markets
have a
that
look at
are
those.
those market growth rates, just imagine 70% plus growth since March
Yeah,
2020. Um,
I know.
talk about property doubling and how long it takes. And I hear many people say 10 years, and I will often push back on that, saying I tend to think it's a little bit longer on average, but a well-selected property could double quicker. But we're looking at some interesting times in those three markets with that amount of growth in really under 5 years.
Yeah. The way I look at it, you do have to consider the normal growth drivers, but the reason that Perth caught fire was because it is an amazing place to live. They've got lots of good infrastructure and they've got really good population growth now. And so it was a bargain if you're an investor buying across Australia, or even a home buyer, and you're looking for good value. Perth was great value, but now it's really starting to catch up to the other, well, certainly starting to catch up to Brisbane.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would say it's still got growth coming to it until it levels out with the others. And then it'll all change again. So, Sydney will start to look good again. And we can talk in a second about what we're going to about what we see with Melbourne. So let's take a look at another data set from CoreLogic. So this is a really cool graph that they publish every month. And so this is all dwellings. So just like PropTrack, we're now looking at units and houses in together. And so for the month, they've got Melbourne at 0.4%, and then Hobart down 0.5, and Darwin 0.2. Then for the quarter, it's looking like much more of a trend, wouldn't you say, Scott, or not?
Yeah. I mean, what does that say? 0.9% for the quarter. So if we saw three more quarters of that, Melbourne's going to be down nearly 4% for the year.
Yeah. But then when you look at it, so it's only like that downward trend is fairly recent because it doesn't look that bad over the last 12 months.
No. So it's wiping out a bit of growth we saw 6 to 12 months ago. So for the people that maybe bought in then, it's sort of we're seeing
Mm,
some positivity that's getting quickly erased in the annual figure.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
certainly other trends will be that that annual figure is going to go negative.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Okay, and so this core logic, once again, dwellings. So this is where we saw all the press with them saying Brisbane has now overtaken Melbourne's median. So Brisbane median for house and unit, CoreLogic is saying 873,000, while Melbourne, they've got that at 781. You know what I think about? I think about all those people who were heavily marketed into buying a lot of apartments in Melbourne, and they had to buy in high because they were brand new properties, and they were told, oh, you can use depreciation to make your units cash flow positive. And then those units have never really increased in capital growth. And and that's why you see people saying, oh, I had to sell my portfolio because I had to keep feeding it too much money. Um, yeah, anyway,
yeah,
but
I would say even till recently, Brisbane was quite similar to a lot of people had bought some of these new units. We had that building boom in Brisbane units several years ago. I mean, all over New Farm throughout Newmarket and some of those
yeah,
inner city areas, the West End, just fully built out with units. And I would say they got very little growth, but there is that much growth in Southeast Queensland at the moment and such a housing shortage that, unlike Melbourne, I think those people are finally coming out and at least inching ahead with a bit of growth on their unit.
yeah,
Still
yeah,
not
that's
something we're
right.
spending a lot of time looking at, but
Mm,
um,
yeah, interesting times. Okay, all right. So, as we say, every time we catch up, those data sets, that was the past. So, where's the market heading in the future? So, no matter what has happened in the past, it's not an indication of where prices are heading. So, maybe Melbourne might recover, but I know it won't. Anyway, I've got to get off that track. So, market influences. So, today, the big news is that the RBA, not a surprise, has kept the rates on hold, uh, which is something that the property market was looking forward to hearing. So the next meeting isn't until the 23rd of September, so we can expect no change until then. That's really going to have a big impact on the spring market because we're starting to see, property come onto the market now for spring, and it's really going to influence prices, I think.
I
Um,
mean, it was only a few weeks ago, there was a lot of talk of, a rate hike. I've many
yeah.
texts from people saying, should I be reworking my numbers? And people were
Mm,
literally planning for one to maybe even two rate hikes through the end of the year. That's just looking highly unlikely, I think, at the moment. Um,
yeah. And also, like the crazy stock market at the moment.
well, we're all watching the news there. About two days ago, things went crazy in Japan, and they had a 10% plunge in one day.
Mm,
Either Deborah or I are experts,
no,
in that space, so we're always very careful not to be providing advice, but we can talk to you about what we see. And I see
yeah,
tons of volatility, markets going up and down 5% in a day. Um, those of us with our properties are sort of sitting back, not seeing much movement in our rents and in
mm,
values. And that does sink into people, I think, over time. If we see a lot of share price volatility out there, it's very likely going to have people give property another look,
yeah, exactly.
as they
Particularly,
for that
go on.
stableness.
Yeah, and particularly people trying to buy in an SMSF. a lot of people we're seeing now are just so sick of not having any control over their super, and they're just like, right, I'm going to put some property in there.
Yeah.
All right. So our topic for today is about heading into the spring market. Where do we see value, and for what types of property? So I think when I'm thinking about this kind of question, I'm always asked, we do have to think there are two distinct groups who who will find value in different markets. So if you're an investor, you really should be chasing capital growth drivers. And so
Mm.
the things that we look for are areas where there's a lot of diversity in jobs. So not a mining town or Canberra where, there's only one employer. And then we want to see good demographics, so lots of families with younger children being born, and of course, really good infrastructure. But then when you're looking to buy your home, you'll have your own personal criteria that you really should, pay attention to. And so we typically see, it starts with family. We want to be relatively close to family, work, friends, and then infrastructure, sort of goes alongside of that. But given those markets, what what areas are you seeing as as a green light, and what areas are you seeing as a red light, Scott?
Hmm. Are we are we are we going to show the chart of cities, or
Oh, okay. Yep,
if
I
we
can
have it?
do that.
Um,
Yeah, there we go.
well, I think to start, our strong preference has been to stick to the capital cities. Uh,
Mm,
you know, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, they're satellite cities
yeah.
of the Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast and Geelong. That has been sort of our short list. And I'm sure you'll chime in with Newcastle and Wollongong, right? But prices are just getting up there, in these markets, and the number of people we're coming to us with budgets in the 500s and 600s. Unless you're going to just go buy an old unit in one of those markets, we've really got to start thinking about going a bit regional.
Mm,
And we've got a little chart here which shows our top 20 cities.
yeah. So regional. So would you consider Sunshine Coast regional?
No, I actually tend to call Southeast Queensland its own area. I tend to think of it that
Okay.
way. And I think as we get toward the Olympics, it's just growing more and more together into one connected region.
Yeah.
Um, even
Hmm.
more so than probably if you said Newcastle and Wollongong with Sydney, those feel more separate to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. All right. So, but you're a buy in Newcastle, aren't you? You'd buy
Well,
there.
I think just because it's still relatively inexpensive compared to Sydney. Now we're going a bit inland out toward Maitland and maybe a
Yeah.
little bit toward the Hunter Valley, just because we are looking for places where we can build, and
Mm,
that tend to be hard in an inner city established area in
yeah.
Castle.
Yep. Okay. And so you go Sunshine Coast, and then uh, you're not really focused on Wollongong, are you?
Um, we'd love to if we found opportunities down there.
Yeah.
I mean, when I
Okay.
see developers pitching $1 million houses in Picton, I just
Mm,
have to wonder, Tamworth.
yeah, that's crazy with that
Yeah.
new
I
airport.
mean, if we're
Yeah.
going to spend
Okay.
$1 million, I'd want to get into something around Leppington, I think, if I
Yeah.
build something.
Hmm. And so then, where's your next favorite?
Little old Harvey Bay is down there at number 27. That's one we're
Yeah.
certainly watching. I mean, you got a smaller population base down there, say just 60,000 people, but it is coastal, has its beaches,
Beautiful.
a little bit
Yeah.
of growing, industry, but really people are mostly working from home there, I would say. So that the missing piece really would be some big jobs creator that would take that to the next level.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Okay. And so is there any others that you're
Look,
sort of excited about?
I will just make a small mention down there on Tamworth only because I was up there last week.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 5 hours outside of Sydney. You're almost midway between Brisbane and Sydney. And from a
Mm.
livability perspective, for somebody who wants to leave a capital city with their family and have a lot to do in a small market, it really is quite amazing how much there is up there. So
Yeah.
there's a new university campus being built there. Some pieces of infrastructure coming in, a lot of solar panel installations, kind of driving some of the locals crazy, I think, because not everybody's a fan of the wind farms and the panels covering the land.
All right.
Um, Kind of
Oh
go with
yeah.
the flow if we're all going to do our part to help the environment.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty.
Have you got
So,
any on there, Deborah, you're spending much time on?
oh yeah. So, for the next 6 months, like we're bullish on Brisbane, Perth, and Sydney.
Yeah,
So, of course, growth aspects. So, Western Sydney, I absolutely love because it's such a big capital growth driver. And I do have a real weak spot for Newcastle. I just absolutely love that area. And it's not because I personally love it. I do, but it really just has everything that you would want in a market. So it's got lots and lots of jobs. It's really a mini Sydney and it's surrounded by, on three sides, by water. So
yeah.
prices are just going up. And it's got what I love, which is a lot of older suburbs with a lot of older properties on larger blocks, which, now it's time to rezone those. So all of those now, Melbourne, of course, I'm absolutely do not buy in Melbourne. If you have to buy in Melbourne or you're tempted to, you would have to be negotiating hard. And I think people should have in mind that they need to negotiate between 50 to 100 or more, 100,000 off the asking price so that they won't be underwater in the next 12 months to 2 years. Actually, on that, I think it will be 2 years before Melbourne pulls out of the downturn because it's all the state legislative taxes and regime changes. So, uh, like their tenancy arrangements and things like that, we're going to have to wait until the next election in Victoria, and that's not until 2026.
So a
So you had a few.
few years of
Anyway,
this, yes.
yeah,
Versus,
it's
Brisbane, I mean, Queensland, who has an upcoming election. So
yeah,
certainly may see some more changes up there in the short term. Like I'm not quite that negative on Melbourne, but at the same time, it's not really on our list. We're trying to
mm,
be very selective looking at anything there.
yeah.
Uh,
And there's plenty of other better places to buy, really. Yeah.
I think that's what it
Um,
boils down to. We can each come up with five better places. So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, so I wouldn't buy in Adelaide unless, you're buying a home or a vineyard. And yeah, love Newcastle. I'm a no for Canberra. And if I was asked, if pushed to suggest something that isn't a major capital city, yeah, I would recommend
yeah.
Toowoomba, because they do say that it is Australia's largest inland city other than Canberra. And so Toowoomba, current population of nearly 150,000. Um, yeah, it's a little bit smaller than Canberra.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so it is right up there, um, size wise. And what are we seeing? Yeah, and population change, admittedly, over the last, what did you say, 12 years? Um, Population change, yeah, on the rise. Mm. Okay. What else do we want to say? Is there anything else you want to say on that, on the future?
Hmm,
No?
no.
No. Okay,
Sorry, I
well,
just got a mind blank.
yeah, okay. I've got a note here. So everyone is really, like, you often hear us talk about houses, but we are starting to look more and more at units because of the way a lot of state governments are rezoning. And I thought this was a really good example, if I can get it to work. So this one, which is right in Parramatta, interesting pricing. Oh, so you can still grab it if you're watching now. But this is the story that we're going to see more and more. So I think there's about 8 or 10 levels in that property now, but it's been rezoned to 60. So
Wow.
this would be one of those ones where you would buy in and then buddy up with the other owners. Admittedly, that is a bit of a task. But in New South Wales, there's legislation that only 75% of the owners have to agree to, do a knockdown rebuild or something, or to make any changes. Yeah, so you could buddy up with the other owners and then work with a developer, and you can turn your one unit into maybe two or three.
Hmm.
So, yeah, think about
Thanks.
unit.
Yeah.
Any comment on that? No.
Um, no, I think it's just a way to add value, to a unit separate from doing a renovation is to, find one that can be knocked down and turned into a lot more.
Yeah. And of course, it doesn't happen overnight. And, there's a few hurdles along the way, but it is something that we're really starting to see a lot more of. And then there's a little shameless plug if I can find it. Um, we are running, coming into spring, we're running an auction masterclass next Monday. So you'll have to be an action taker to get a seat. But that's really, because we're coming into spring, more properties are going to be sold under auction, and a lot of people just plain avoid participating in auction. So we've got a little system that we use that helps people be confident and be more successful at. But apart from that, is there anything else we need to say?
I'm just amazed at how many people go to auctions and they end up saying they went and paid way more than what they planned doing, and I guess in that,
Scary.
if you had hired somebody to represent you and they had a limit, they might keep you from overpaying for a property. That seems like a pretty small cost to get some help
Yeah,
on auction day. Um,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, alrighty. So if there isn't anything else, Scott, is there anything else you want to add? Mhm.
um, anything else I want to add? No.
Pause for effect. Okay, alrighty. Well, thanks very much for visiting us today. Next time on Market Watch, Scott and I will also be digging into the latest numbers, but we also will probably be covering off the strategy around rooming houses, which is a real trend that we're starting to see. With rooming houses, are they as good as they're cracked up to be? What are the positives and the negatives? But if you want to be notified when the new episode is available, you'll need to subscribe to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And also, if you would like to chat to either of us, our contact details will be in the description below. So until next time, we're going to say goodbye.
Great, everyone. Put a question in the comments. We'll try to answer it for you.
Yeah, do that. Okay.